that shuts off his and turns yours on.
Okay. The 9,450th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is Security Council Resolutions 1160/1998, 1199/1998, 1203/1998, 1239/1999, and 1244/1999. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Serbia to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. On behalf of the Council, I welcome Her Excellency Ms. Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, and I ask the protocol officer to escort her to the Council table. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Caroline Ziadeh, Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite Mrs. Vjosa Osmani Sadriu to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2023/735, the report of the Secretary General on the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo. I now give the floor to Ms. Caroline Ziadeh.
Obrigado, Signor Presidente. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to update the Council on recent key developments in Kosovo. I trust that you had time to go through the Secretary General reports. Said report covers the period from 19th of March till 18th of September. However, I will begin my statement today by bringing to your attention a serious security incident that took place on the 24th of September near Banjska village of Zvečan municipalities in northern Kosovo. Early in the morning that day, a Kosovo police officer was killed, and 2 others were injured at the entrance of the village, which has been blocked by 2 vehicles. Over the course of the day and into the evening, Kosovo police and heavily armed elements engaged in gunfire exchanges, resulting in 4 deaths and a number of arrests. The Kosovo police seized a significant number of vehicles, military equipment, and weapons. UNMIK joined the international community in unequivocally condemning the incident and the tragic loss of life and calling for restraint. It is essential that the investigations currently underway provide the opportunity to factually document these events and hold perpetrators accountable. The major events on 24th of September exacerbated an already deteriorating security environment, characterized by an atmosphere of mutual suspicion and contradictory perceptions touching much of the population, especially in northern Kosovo and among Kosovo Serb communities elsewhere in Kosovo. Mr. President, in the days, weeks, and even months leading up to the 24th September, political and security tensions in northern Kosovo steadily rose in the absence of tangible progress in the EU-facilitated dialogue. The high-level meeting held on the 14th of September in Brussels produced no consensus on the sequencing for the implementation of prior agreements. This was, yet again, an opportunity missed to engage constructively towards a program for the implementation of the parties' respective commitments under the agreements made in Brussels and Ohrid earlier this year. Both sides have exchanged inflammatory public allegations, damaging the fragile communication channels between the communities in Kosovo and between political leaders in Belgrade and Pristina. During my interaction with a wide array of interlocutors, including municipal, religious, civil society organizations, and business leaders, the most common sentiments I have encountered are frustration and concern caused by an uncertain future. Tensions and anxiety across Kosovo, reported particularly from members of Kosovo Serb communities, have been fueled by divisive rhetoric narratives. Rather than stoking tensions through political messages directed at one group, elected leaders bear responsibility for addressing the security needs and broader socioeconomic concerns of all segments of society, regardless of ethnic, linguistic, or political background. Mr. President, setbacks like the boycott by the Kosovo Serbs of the 23rd local elections in northern Kosovo, where they represent the majority of the population, ensuing questions of adequate political representation, and the terrible, yes, the terrible violence on the 29th of May that led to serious injuries of 93 KFOR personnel as well as civilians represent grave dangers to achieving long-term peace and stability. The current political impasse, with its impact on the security and well-being of the population, can only be overcome through compromise that should be worked out in the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. De-escalatory measures are critical to reduce tensions, and in this regard, I share the hopes of many that the outcome of the EU and US-led meetings held separately in Pristina and Belgrade on the 21st of October will place the dialogue back on a forward path with firm commitment by both sides to implement de-escalatory measures and the proposals set forth during the meeting. This includes recommitment by both parties to fully implement all previous dialogue agreements. Accordingly, work on the establishment of the association community of Serb-majority municipalities should begin without delay or preconditions, alongside all other essential agreements. We should keep in mind that failure of achieving political compromise will continue to adversely impact the well-being of ordinary people, yes, ordinary people, including their ability to receive basic services and realize their socioeconomic potential. In this regard, it is crucial to note that delays in the implementation of dialogue agreement led to the postponement of an EU donor conference envisaged in the implementation annex of the February agreement, which would have likely attracted substantially economic support and investment opportunities. Mr. President, we have often spoken during Council sessions about the positive ways in which sustainable political agreements impact people's lives, even when they come at a cost. Perhaps too rarely we talk about the even greater cost that accrues from not reaching agreements. Here, I'm speaking of the cost to all communities, be they Serbs, Albanians, or others residing in different parts of Kosovo and the entire region. Tension, isolation, and growing lack of trust in political leaders to address people's most immediate interests and legitimate grievances witnessed these past months, and worse, the resort to violence and intimidation by those of ill will threaten the hard-won gains achieved through the EU-facilitated dialogue. Responsible leadership and compromise are required to return to a more productive political process. We know the maxim that there is no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. It could not be stressed enough that regional cooperation and integration initiatives in all forms should be welcomed and prioritized in order to contribute to a more productive dialogue. Peace, prosperity, progress, sustainability, and connectivity were some of the main themes highlighted during the General Assembly High-Level Week in September and during the Berlin Process Summit held last week in Tirana. Today, in this august body, I believe that it is of the utmost importance that the international community urges both Pristina and Belgrade to foster purposeful and concerted actions in line with these main priorities, including the observation that no single leader or actor can expect to go it alone in overcoming the present global challenges. Mr. President, I have already pointed out in my statement of April this year, and it should be repeated today, the need for clear and continuous communication with the public on issues affecting their livelihoods, health, and human rights. Issues such land expropriation and the freedom of movement of people and goods, including across the administrative boundary line. The work of rule of law institutions must be anchored in the human rights framework and should be clearly and publicly explained and communicated to avoid misperceptions and ensure equality of all before the law. I have welcomed the adoption of a law regulating the application process for the status of conflict-related sexual violence survivors by the Assembly of Kosovo. I would also encourage authorities to consider the recommendation of the UN Special Rapporteur on Truth, Justice, Reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence in this regard. Following continued advocacy by UNMIC, UN agencies, and civil society groups for the inclusion of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in the Constitution, we welcome the Constitutional Court's decision of the 1st of August this year that paves the way for the inclusion of international human rights norms on the rights of persons with disability within the Kosovo legal framework. Mr. President, this year we mark the 5th anniversary of UNMIC's trust-building agenda. Despite a track record of success in strengthening dialogue, social cohesion, and resilience at the grassroots level, the environment has become more challenging this past year. Nonetheless, we remain strongly committed to continue to work with our partners from all communities in Kosovo to foster communication and understanding among people. Doing so, nurture the ground for acceptance of the difficult but essential compromises necessary to achieve progress in the dialogue at the leadership level. As announced 6 months ago, the Barabar Center was launched with support from UNMIC and the Pristina municipality. Partnership at its best. Used in both official languages in Kosovo, Albanian and Serbian. The word Barabar means equality and fairness, and we need equality and fairness. The center is a safe space in the heart of Pristina, where people from all walks of life and all communities can meet to freely deliberate and transcend divisive narratives. Since its opening in May this year, the center has organized more than 40 multi-ethnic events, demonstrating that even during challenging times, it is possible and indeed desirable to get the people together. To advance both women and youth peace and security agenda, the mission continues to support women-led civil society organizations and encourage involvement of youth and women leaders in decision-making at all levels. We support initiatives aiming to promote active and meaningful participation of women in political processes and to integrate gender perspective into the normalization process between Belgrade and Pristina. We will also continue to support young people, including through the annual UN Youth Assembly in Kosovo. The 5th Youth Assembly this year was held at the height of the political tension. Still, more than 150 youth leaders from across Kosovo and the region came together and constructively addressed critical issues, including combating misinformation and hate speech, youth decision-making, and stopping domestic violence, just to name few. We thank the UN Kosovo team for their close cooperation in this regard. Together with our partners, the mission ensures equal access to justice by improving courtrooms infrastructure, providing free legal assistance and representation to more than 2,000 people from all communities throughout Kosovo, and offering interpretation services. We will continue to do so. I wish to take this opportunity to commend the resilience of local actors, including UNMIK partners, committed women, men, and young people from all communities in Kosovo who, despite divisive narratives and challenging realities, work tirelessly to bring more understanding between their communities. Mr. President, I would like to reiterate UNMIK's support for the EU-facilitated dialogue with a sense of urgency in light of the instability that has characterized the current reporting period. We are committed to supporting all voices, rejecting zero-sum polarization in favor of compromise and collaboration. We will continue our trust-building work, even though we often hear that trust is at its lowest level at this moment. But our answer was, is, and remains, if not now, when? Let me say this again, and let me say it very clearly. Dialogue is the only way forward. Mr. President, before closing, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the tremendous contribution of one of my key partners during a very challenging time in Kosovo, outgoing K4 Commander Major General Angelo Michel Ristuccia of Italy. His leadership was instrumental during the management of several crises that erupted over the past year. I also extend a special welcome to his successor, Major General Uzkan Ulutaş of Turkey, with whom I know we will enjoy a similarly close working relationship in fulfillment of our common mandate. I conclude by expressing my deep appreciation to you, distinguished members of the Council, for your support. This support is indispensable to UNMIK's continued work to help ensure conditions for a peaceful and normal life for all people in Kosovo. And I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mrs. Yadeh for her briefing. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia.
Thank you. Dear President of the Security Council, respected members of the Security Council, esteemed Special Representative, I would like to start by expressing my gratitude to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, and Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of UNMIK, Ms. Ziade, for the attention they dedicate to Kosovo and Metohija. As always, I would like to emphasize the importance of regular and objective reporting on the situation in Kosovo and Metohija, autonomous province of the Republic of Serbia, in line with the Constitution of the Republic of Serbia, but also with the UN Charter, UN Security Council Resolution 1244, and basic principles of international law. I am thankful and grateful for the opportunity to share the views with those present and with the international public regarding the latest UNMIK report. I will do my best to abstain from overly bureaucratic language and present the views in a clear and straightforward manner, simply because the situation in the past 2 years, and I fully agree with Ms. Ziade, the situation in the last 2 years, and especially in the past 12 months, became so grave that we all need to try and understand, not as politicians, but first and foremost as human beings, what is happening and where to go from here, in order to provide at least a glimpse of hope to those in Kosovo and Metohija who suffer every day, at least a glimpse of hope that stability and long-term peace is in fact possible. Mr. President, from what we can all see on the ground, based on numerous examples in the past 12 months, the officials in Pristina, the administration in Pristina, regrettably, I have to say, to put it in the simplest form, have only three key messages for Serbs, other non-Albanians, and the international community. And all that we are seeing in these reports and all that is happening every day on the ground can be summed up in these three key messages. First message is, those Serbs who left after 1999 or during the ethnic cleansing, the pogrom of 2004, should not come back. They are not welcome. It is deeply disturbing. It is unfortunate, but it is also embarrassing that Kosovo and Metohija remains, according to all relevant UN reports, a territory which, compared to all post-conflict territories in this whole crazy world of ours, has the least number of returnees. Less than 2% of displaced people returned to Kosovo and Metohija. Less than 2%. And this is not by accident. When they go back, if they try to go back, they usually see their property illegally seized by someone. They then, obviously, go to authorities to report usurpation and to ask for assistance, hoping for justice and hoping for fairness. On most occasions, instead of getting assistance, they find themselves arrested and end up in prison. Just in the past few months, to cite few examples, individuals such as Dusan Arsic from Matica near Pristina, Časlav Jolić and Gavrilo Milosavljević from Istok, Milorad Đoković from Vitomirac, were all arrested, all of them, on the charges of war crimes. Although they entered Kosovo and Metohija on multiple occasions in the past and were never arrested or charged with anything whatsoever, until such time when they asked for their private property, their land, their homes, to be returned to them. At that point in time, the charges suddenly emerged, only after a legal process of reclaiming usurped property had actually begun. This is a clear message to displaced Serbs from the official Pristina. Do not return, you're not welcome. Hence, again, the humiliating fact. Kosovo and Metohija remains world champion in the least number of returnees of all of the post-conflict territories across the world. Second message that is being sent to Serbs in the most brutal ways is this. Those who stayed, who still live on the territory of Kosovo and Metohija, and who want to stay, should leave. Through months and years of systematic, outright annulment of even the most basic human rights for Serbs and other non-Albanians, turning their lives into a constant nightmare of insecurity caused by total and utter absence of the rule of law, and marked by arbitrary decision-making on who, when, will be arrested, taken into custody, beaten up, tortured, humiliated, kept in prison for unknown periods of time, wondering if your children, brothers, fathers, husbands will be shot at freely simply because they are Serbs, if your priests will be deported, your property confiscated, if those who shoot at you and those who beat you up will always, as a rule, always be let to walk free, is happening every day in Kosovo and Metohija. By doing that, every day of every week, of every month, of every year, for the past few years, Pristina has managed to generate a dangerous security crisis, as we have seen also in the latest UNMIK report. What we see in Kosovo and Metohija today is comprehensive political, legal, institutional, and physical violence against Serbs. From a human standpoint, I have to say, the absolute turning point when everyone, I think everyone understood that what Pristina wants is for Serbs to leave, wasn't actually the attempt at murder of the 11-year-old boy, Stefan Stojanovic, and his 21-year-old cousin Miloš, while participating in Christmas procession in Gotovuša near Štrpce. No, it was actually the day when Azem Kurtaj, who committed this crime, shooting at children at Christmas, a member of the so-called Kosovo security forces, which is, by the way, illegal formation according to Article 15 of the UN Security Council Resolution 1244, when Azem Kurtaj, who shot at these children, was let go as a free man. Again, Azem Kurtaj, who shot and wounded 11-year-old child on Christmas, is today in Kosovo and Metohija a free man. He was granted a complete amnesty by Pristina judiciary. And that is perhaps all that anyone needs to know about the rule of law in Kosovo and Metohija. And all anyone needs to know about conditions in which Serbs and other non-Albanians live in Kosovo and Metohija today. So let me pose this question to all of us here. When an Albanian, a member of the so-called Kosovo security forces, shoots and severely wounds a child and is then proclaimed a free man, is this not a call by official Pristina for anyone else to shoot at Serbs, terrorize them, wound, kill them? Why wouldn't they? There is no consequence of such acts. The amnesty for Kurtaj is basically an open invitation for others to repeat these kind of acts. On the other hand, interestingly, in that same legal system, according to that kind of a standard of the rule of law, which free the criminal who shoots at children. If you are a Serb, like brothers Andrija and Mihailo Mitic, you get arrested and you get detained in prison for a month for not wearing seatbelt. Not wearing seatbelt. And you end up in prison for 1 month if you're a Serb. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But the sad truth is this. This is what everyday life of Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija looks like today. And unfortunately, we have even more paradox examples. Slađan Trajković and Zlatko Arsić were both accused and arrested for alleged war crimes. Surprisingly, they both used to be members of the so-called Kosovo police, where in order to get employed, you had to obtain security clearances from Pristina. So they passed security clearances by Pristina, were accepted to the Kosovo police force, served for years as part of multi-ethnic policing, thanks to the implementation of the Brussels Agreement by Belgrade and Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija. And once they left the police, they were arrested and charged as being war criminals. Slađan Trajković, who was part of the Kosovo police since 2013 and passed all the security clearances, was arrested on 15th of December, is still in custody, now for over 10 months. Zlatko Arsić, who was within Kosovo police even longer, and surprisingly, he was also awarded a medal by Pristina for serving in Kosovo police as an honorable man. Well, he was arrested on 7th of March. He, of course, is also still in custody, still in prison, not with his family. So the very simple truth is, in today's Kosovo, if you're a Serb, you can be arbitrarily arrested, charged, and kept in custody for as long as their politicians wish. And that is happening in the presence of KFOR, UNMIK, and EULEX. Can you imagine what would the life be in Kosovo and Metohija if governed by Pristina without the presence of KFOR, UNMIK, and EULEX? Just from the beginning of this year, 6 Serbs were shot at, and no one was found criminally responsible. No one. 6 people shot, no one criminally responsible. In the past 2.5 years, there were unbelievable 434 ethnically motivated attacks on Serbs and their property. 434. 50% increase compared to the period before the administration of Mr. Albin Kurti. And we still don't know if anybody was held accountable or if any charges were pressed against any of the perpetrators. As a direct result of this terror, 11% of Serbs have left north of Kosovo and Metohija since Albin Kurti came to power. I will repeat this. 11% of Serbs left Kosovo and Metohija in the past 2 years due to the campaign of systematic and widespread violence against Serbs and deliberate creation of unbearable living conditions for them. In this regard, the question posed before this body is whether this serves as a reason for action or merely a cause for statements. And now, third clear message from the official Pristina to Serbs, but also to international community, is this. Agreements reached shall not be implemented. Those agreements, or parts of the agreements that were in fact implemented, will be annulled, blocked, or dismantled. As this report, UNMIK reports, clearly states, as did all others from the past 10 plus years, Not a word of the Brussels Agreement as the first agreement on normalization was implemented by Pristina. This must change. High time for the establishment of the Community of Serbian Municipalities passed 5 or 6 years ago, but still this is something that needs to be done. The Community of Serbian Municipalities is an unavoidable element on which the implementation of any further agreement rests upon. But let me state clearly, it needs to be the Community of Serbian Municipalities in accordance with the signed agreements from 2013 and 2015, not just any organization bearing that name. Method of forming and adopting the statute of the Community of Serbian Municipalities, as well as its powers, have been clearly defined and cannot be subject to interpretation. General principles for establishing Community of Serbian Municipalities, its legal framework, and a detailed list of its competencies are clearly stated in the agreement signed in 2015, signed by Isa Mustafa as the official representative of Pristina in the presence of the then EU High Representative Federica Mogherini. We all know that in the past 2 years, Pristina openly stated on several occasions that it has no interest or intention in the Community of Serbian Municipalities. To make things worse, in the past 12 months, Pristina has actively been undermining everything that was achieved through the Brussels Agreement. On 3rd of November last year, Albin Kurti removed the commander of the Regional Police Directorate North, effectively dismantling the multi-ethnic police force in Kosovo and Metohija, and directly contradicting Article 9 of the Brussels Agreement. Only after this action did representatives of Serbian people left institutions in Pristina. This departure occurred after Kurti essentially expelled them from those institutions. As yet another signal that they do not recognize or care for the Brussels Agreement, on the 4th of August, amidst the security crisis in northern Kosovo and Metohija, Pristina tried to revoke the license of telecom company, MTS. And this measure represents direct violation of the Brussels Agreement and the accomplishments achieved through this agreement. Then on 14th of June, Pristina also directly breached the Central European Free Trade Agreement, CEFTA. And not for the first time, ban on the movement of Serbian goods or goods from Central Serbia in Kosovo and Metohija directly violates principles of free trade, CEFTA agreement, Chapter 4 of the Stabilization and Association Agreement between the EU and Pristina. As a direct consequence, Serbs and other non-Albanians in Kosovo and Metohija are finding it increasingly difficult to access food and medicines. We have looming humanitarian crisis. Healthcare institutions in predominantly Serbian areas cannot procure basic medical supplies such as oxygen. Medications that are no longer available include chemotherapy drugs, anesthetics, antibiotics, infusion solution, vaccines, etc. Medications for extremely urgent cases and surgeries for a maximum of 2 more weeks are still available. They lack even BCG vaccines for babies. When we talk about the fact that Pristina is simply ignoring international agreements, be it the Brussels Agreement, CEFTA, or Stabilization and Association Agreement, let us look at how the most recent requests for de-escalation made by the international community were met by Pristina. Or firstly, how did it come to the escalation of already terrible situation on the ground? The key event from which everything irreversibly began to move toward comprehensive destabilization were the sham local elections held in April in 4 municipalities in the north. Instead of understanding that Serbs left provisional institutions as a clear call for full implementation after more than 10 years, finally full implementation of the Brussels Agreement by Pristina and salvation of the dialogue process, Pristina decided to escalate further. They decided to hold local elections in which only 0.03% of Serbs, who make up more than 95% of the population in northern Kosovo and Metohija, participated. Elections were conducted in a reduced number of polling stations. Voting took place in special containers, guided by fully armed militia. Free and fair is not the term anyone would use to describe those elections. Following these events, because they cannot be referred to as elections, appointees of Pristina, because they cannot be referred to as elected mayors, forcefully entered the municipal offices, accompanied by special units of Kosovo police armed with long-barrel guns, which is also direct violation of the Brussels Agreement. What happened in the following days, you all know. We heard it in the UNMIK report. It was basically a terrible escalation. Protests resulted in the injury of more than 50 unarmed Serbs. Injuries were inflicted on KFOR members, which is tragic and which is unacceptable. On that occasion, 3 Serbs were hospitalized due to gunshot wounds, and 4 of them were arrested. The most severe injuries were sustained by Dragiša Gajak, who was shot in the back with a burst from an automatic rifle, suffering injuries to his spine, abdomen, and hand. Member of the special unit of the Kosovo police responsible for this crime has not been arrested and has not been even charged. Rather than pursuing criminals who shot at the demonstrators, Pristina keeps people like Dusan Obrenović in prison. Obrenović, as clearly seen in the video footage, peacefully protested against violence. This and subsequent evidence did not prevent his arrest, following which he was brutally mistreated, beaten up, and remains in custody to this day. The EU then, on 3rd of June, called for de-escalation. Since 3rd of June, when the EU demanded immediate de-escalation, Pristina has taken a total of 23 additional escalatory steps in north of Kosovo and Metohija. 23. Total of 24 Serbs were arrested since EU demanded immediate de-escalation. One of them, Milun Milenković Lune, was brutally and inhumanely beaten during his arrest and detention, documented through medical records and reports. He is accused of participating in citizen protests in Zvečan, even though he was not even present in Zvečan on the day of the protest. He is also still detained. UNMIK report confirms that there is a video displaying mistreatment and degradation of one of the arrested individuals while in police custody, which was widely circulated on social media. Kosovo police intercepted 2 underage children, Christian, 15 years old, Dara, 17 years old, so 15 and 17, Radosavljević, riding quad bikes in the village of Rudine near Zvečan, and brutally beat them. 15-year-old boy and 17-year-old girl. Their mother found her son kneeling, hands covering his head, while 2 heavily armed policemen stood over him. On 23rd of June, the so-called Kosovo security forces conducted a military march with hundreds of their members in southern Mitrovica and around the outskirts of northern Mitrovica. The EU High Representative, Joseph Borrell, on the occasion stated, and I quote, "Escalation continues." So this was after the EU called for de-escalation. The High Representative of the EU says the escalation continues. Very alarmed by the situation in north of Kosovo, extrajudicial arrests of Kosovo Serbs, Kosovo security forces marching in South Mitrovica. On 28th of June, on our most important national holiday, Vidovdan, the Kosovo police stopped as much as 3 times the car in which the elder son of Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, Danilo, was traveling. It's a clear, brutal provocation. On 29th of June, Pristina unilaterally declared the Civil Protection a terrorist organization without coordination and consultation with international partners, and so on, and so on, and so on. Pristina continued illegal expropriation of land owned by Serbs in Subin Potok and Leposavić, and we heard that from Special Representative. They also enacted a new law on expropriation, legalizing unlawful seizure of Serbian land. Pristina persisted in establishing illegal bases in northern Kosovo on land unlawfully taken from Serbs. EU delegation in Pristina stated this, and again, I quote, "Establishment of 4 Kosovo police bases on private and socially owned land, in some cases prior to initiating expropriation procedures, raises concerns about property rights in the north of Kosovo and must be adequately addressed." I end quote. And finally, only 2 days ago, abbot of the Devina Voda monastery near Zvečan, Father Fotije, was deported to North Macedonia without any clear explanation. He was just deported. And in the same brief period after the EU called for de-escalation, as much as 74 ethnically motivated attacks against Serbs occurred. Dear members of the Security Council, the crisis in Kosovo and Metohija has tragically but predictably escalated on September 24th, when armed conflict occurred between a group of armed Serbs from Kosovo and Metohija and police and paramilitary formations from Pristina in the village of Banjska and its surroundings. Investigations are ongoing to provide all of the answers and shed light on all uncertainties regarding this event, including the manner in which 2 out of 3 deceased Serbs lost their lives, which appears to be a cold-blooded execution after they surrendered. I want to assert responsibly that Belgrade or Serbia's security forces, Serbia's security structures, had nothing to do with this event, and we are prepared to provide all information and evidence available today to the international community to confirm this statement. I would also like to use this opportunity to express my sincere regret for the loss of human lives, and I hope it never happens again. Events in Banjska are a logical consequence, unfortunately, of the reign of fear and terror that Pristina decided to enforce despite clear demands for de-escalation from the international community, precisely counting on the peaceful resistance of the Serbian people in northern Kosovo and Metohija to become something more. To sum up, we have been continuously and repeatedly expressing concerns about the dangers that may arise from Pristina's refusal to fulfill the obligations undertaken in the dialogue with Belgrade, facilitated by the EU. Current situation on the ground is inevitable consequence of a series of more than a dozen unilateral actions by Pristina. Displaced Serbs cannot return to Kosovo and Metohija. When they try, men get arrested, and women, like Dragica Gašić, threatened and terrorized. Those Serbs who stayed live in terror and insecurity every hour of every day. Pristina basically wants them out and is demonstrating that in clear terms. 11% already left. Make no mistake, what we are testifying is a campaign of silent ethnic cleansing, campaign of systematic and widespread violence against Serbs, deliberate creation of unbearable living conditions for them, consists of gradual but permanent denial of basic human rights, attacks by members of armed Pristina formations, physical assaults on Serbs and their property, false indictments. All previous agreements, and I'm finishing, all previous agreements from the dialogue that have been brutally violated, dealing a fatal blow to the very idea of negotiations, normalization, and reconciliation. These repressive and ethnically motivated actions were carefully calculated to provoke reactions from Serbs in northern Kosovo and Metohija, only for such responses to be later exploited to continue and intensify reprisals and terror. And finally, let me underscore this in the simplest possible terms, what the goal of the Republic of Serbia is. 1, implementation of all past agreements, namely the Brussels Agreement and the establishment of the Community of Serbian Municipalities in line with the agreements reached in 2013 and 2015. 2, security for our people, security for all the people living in Kosovo and Metohija. While the dialogue continues and we search for compromise that will ensure long-term peace and stability, historic reconciliation between Serbs and Albanians, prosperity, please help the people living in Kosovo and Metohija, Serbs as well as other non-Albanians, to live in peace, enjoy basic freedoms, safety and security without constant intimidation and prosecution. Third, we stand for and firmly believe in the principles of international rule of law, UN Charter, and will continue calling for the full respect of the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. 4, peace and stability. Together, let us take steps to prevent the crisis from spiraling out of control completely. Dialogue is the only way to solve the problems in Kosovo and Metohija. At this point in time, the most rational approach would be for KFOR, in line with its mandate from UN Security Resolution 1244, to temporarily assume full responsibility for security in north of Kosovo and Metohija. And we call for new elections in the north of Kosovo and Metohija to be held as soon as possible. I can only say that Belgrade will remain committed to the dialogue despite all of the difficulties. Thank you very much.
I thank Her Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, for her statement. And I'll give the floor to Ms. Osmani Sadriu.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the Council, distinguished guests. I had the honor of speaking to this Council just a few days ago, giving voice to thousands of survivors of sexual violence from the last war in Kosovo. It is when you speak of the pain of those who suffered most that you are reminded again and again of the suffering that wars bring to the most vulnerable. But the story of the survivors of Kosovo is one of resilience, one of turning pain into strength, one of turning agony into positive contribution for their society and their country. As I said that day, the victims of sexual violence during the war in Kosovo chose not just to survive, but to thrive. That is their story. And ladies and gentlemen, that is also the story of Kosovo. A free, independent, sovereign, democratic, and a thriving republic. And it will be so for as long as Earth circles the sun. I speak to you today as the president of a country that has lost around 13,000 people in just a few months of war, with thousands left unaccounted for through enforced disappearance, with the highest number of children killed per capita of any war in former Yugoslavia, with almost every house destroyed, with thousands tortured as political and war prisoners, with thousands raped as a tool of war, with around 80% of the people of Kosovo forced to leave their houses, with practically everything burned down to ashes. And yet again, we chose to rise from the ashes, to rebuild our lives, and build a future where all of our people, no matter their background, can live in a country free of fear, discrimination, or propaganda that can spur violence. A country where the principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are the main pillars on which we stand, and a country that values its alliances and partnerships as the bedrock of our successes. We're also a country that has extended a hand of cooperation to our neighbor Serbia, and we participate in a dialogue through which we would peacefully resolve all of our remaining differences. We decided to do so despite Serbia never having asked for forgiveness, never showing a sign of repent for the crimes committed by the Milosevic regime, never having accepted the reality that happened in front of the eyes of the world. But instead, they remain in a state of denial and make every possible effort to take our region back to the 90s. I am here to say that we will not let that happen. I'm here to confirm the commitment of the people of Kosovo to walk forward, not backwards. I'm here to reconfirm the commitment of all the institutions of Kosovo to not allow that setback that would put at risk the hard-won freedoms that we have achieved together with so many of you, together with democracies from all around the world. Because the sovereign and free Republic of Kosovo is one of the greatest successes in humankind history, and a testament to what democracies can achieve when they stand together against autocracies and genocidal regimes. And this outstanding example of unity in the face of adversity is as important now as it was back in the 90s. Which is why I believe this is not just another meeting of the UN Security Council on Kosovo. On September 24th, the people of Kosovo woke up to the news of a police sergeant killed and another one wounded in the early morning hours. That day, the Republic of Kosovo was a target of an act of aggression by Serbia through terrorist and paramilitary groups. Today, I want to take a moment to honor the memory of now hero of Kosovo, Afrim Bunyaku, whom we lost as he was defending the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our republic. Heroes like Afrim Bunyaku remind us on a daily basis how precious freedom is and how vigilant we ought to be to defend it. May he rest in peace, and his memory serve as a reminder to all of us of the imperative of standing up to authoritarian and malign forces, not just in the Western Balkans, but all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, after the 24th of September, everything has changed and much remains a constant at the same time. On one hand, Kosovo's commitment to protecting our sovereignty, promoting and advancing rule of law and democracy, as well as fostering positive neighborly relations, remains unwavering. On the other hand, Serbia's determination to destabilize the region, to occupy land, and to replicate Milosevic's and Putin's playbooks is at its peak. What Serbia expected to happen that day was to succeed in its Crimea-style planned annexation of the north of Kosovo. What Serbia was caught in by surprise is the unwavering determination and professional response of the Kosovo police forces. During the attack and ever since, Kosovo institutions have maintained close coordination with international security presence in the country. As has been the case historically, Kosovo will continue to work closely with allies and partners to counteract such acts and to prevent them from ever happening again. Yet, what we have heard from Serbia today is an extension of their recurring efforts to tone down the scale of this unprecedented security threat and act of aggression against Kosovo. They want to also twist the entire truth which unfolded in front of the eyes of the world. They try to switch the place of the aggressor with that of the victim of the aggression. But the facts are irrefutable and evidence shows to the contrary. These terrorist groups and paramilitary forces have been financed, trained, armed, and received political support and shelter from one source, the Republic of Serbia. Let me turn to the first element. The financing of these two terrorist organizations called Civilna Zaštita and Severna Brigada has been constantly coming from the state institutions of Serbia. They, in fact, don't even hide it. They appoint them as parallel, albeit illegal and criminal structures to function in the Republic of Kosovo and then give them monthly payments. Before the terrorist act this September, these groups were engaged in terrorizing, intimidating, and threatening Kosovo Serbs who live in Kosovo, and engaged in attacking NATO soldiers. Let me repeat, paid by Serbia, financed by Serbia to attack none other than Kosovo Serbs. Now turning to the second element, the training of these terrorist organizations. As the investigation shows, there's been constant military type training of these terrorist groups in the military bases of Serbia, including in Pasulanske Livade and in Raška. There's video evidence of it, and Serbia state institutions, especially defense institutions, even proudly admit training these terrorist organizations. Moving on to the third element, the arming. The weapons that we have confiscated from the terrorists only that day amount to weapons that can be used by as much as 400 people. Most of them are military-grade weapons that are only produced in the military state industry of Serbia, many produced in 2022 and some only 6 weeks before the attack. The weapons and armored vehicles were smuggled in through illegal routes, and some of the arms came in through vehicles with false NATO signs on them that these terrorists had put on their armored vehicles full of weapons, including full of little green men uniforms. Sounds familiar, right? And finally, the fourth and perhaps the most important element, the political support by and the sheltering of terrorists in Serbia. Radojcic, the leader of the terrorist group who openly admitted being in charge of this attack, is one of the closest collaborators and partners of Serbia's president. He even sits in National Security Council meetings in Serbia, right next to the Serbian president, and is still walking free around Serbia, despite admitting leading that attack. In addition to that, Serbia made sure to announce a day of mourning for those terrorists who killed a police officer while defending our country from aggression. And let us not discard the massive propaganda and constant hints that have been given on the streets, in football matches, in interviews, and all around Serbia ahead of the September 24th act of aggression. The infamous saying, "When the army returns to Kosovo," appeared in graffitis all over Serbia and all the way to Russia. In the light of this evidence, we must set one thing clear. This is not some quarreling between two countries or a blame game. What happened on September 24th was not just an attack on Kosovo. It was a plan to destabilize the entire Western Balkans. This was an attack against democracy and freedom, as well as peace and stability, which you have helped build. Thus, we must be in this together. The response of the international community was united in unequivocally condemning this terrorist act against Kosovo. The amount and types of weapons confiscated represented a significant threat to the safety of not only Kosovo citizens, but also international personnel, including NATO troops. The US, the UK, the EU members and other countries have called for everyone involved in planning and carrying out this attack to be held accountable, and stated that Serbia must fully cooperate. While condemning the act of these paramilitary and terrorist groups, the international community widely praised the reaction of Kosovo police as very professional and in full coordination with NATO forces as well as ULEX. Today, the Kosovo police stands proud as the epitome of professionalism and diversity within the region's law enforcement landscape and beyond. It exemplifies a resounding success story that has unfolded over the 2 decades of our free republic. This remarkable achievement is a testament to the unwavering commitment of our institutions to the cause of law enforcement, but also the visionary partnership of our international allies that support us in this regard. Whether in the south or the north, east or the west, the police's unwavering mission is one and only: instilling trust, safety, and security in neighborhoods and communities across the entire country. Mr. President, Council members, while Vučić aims to cover his true intentions, his acts reveal his underlying motives. He wants more territory. It is that simple. It is, however, that much concerning. And to everyone acting in disbelief that someone would do something like that and use the 90s tactics in 2023, I say, rationality always parts ways with autocrats. Rationality stands no chance among malign intentions, expansionist appetites, and imperialist ambitions. It is utterly unfortunate that Serbia sees violence as a solution to everything. Only in the past few months, Serbia abducted 3 Kosovo police officers within the Kosovo territory, attacked countless journalists, as well as attacked 93 KFOR soldiers through their illegal gangs. And as confirmed by the White House National Security Council, there has been, I quote, a large Serbian military deployment along the border with Kosovo. Calling it a destabilizing development, the statement went on confirming, I quote, unprecedented staging of advanced Serbian artillery, tanks, mechanized infantry units. Serbia only pulled some of its troops from the border after the U.S. warnings that it could face punitive measures. But significant military forces continue to be permanently based in the area, with Serbia's 48 forward operating bases around the border with Kosovo. Ladies and gentlemen, a clearer understanding of the situation also requests a better understanding of the mastermind behind it all. Autocratic leaders often master the art of projecting themselves as promoters of peace, all the while consolidating power behind the facade. Their narratives and propaganda make it challenging for some to discern the true nature of intentions of their leadership. Serbia's government cynically claims that what happened on September 24th is a righteous response of local Serbs against the so-called pressure and terror. Let me be clear. What is happening is not a result of pressure and terror against Kosovo Serbs, but instead a clear reflection of Serbia's strong and historic appetite for more instability, for more territory. I invite you all, dear members, to come to Kosovo so that you can witness firsthand the progress marked in my country. We have made significant strides in establishing one of the most advanced constitutional and legal frameworks in the world that steadfastly protects the rights of minority communities. And what I believe is hard to find in the vast majority of countries around the world, the Serb ethnic minority in Kosovo, that comprises about 3 to 4% of our entire population, holds a veto power over amendments to the Constitution and any law deemed to be of vital interest, ensuring their say in key legislative decisions that relate to education, religion, rights of communities, local election reforms, municipalities, use of language, use of symbols, and other decisions. That is, even if over 90% of the members of parliament would vote in favor, nothing can pass without their consent. With the highest level of decentralization and vast decision-making powers granted to municipalities at the local level, Kosovo's law on local self-government guarantees special rights for minority communities through enhanced municipal competencies in so many areas. This all stands as a testament to Kosovo's commitment to creating an inclusive and diverse society where the rights of all its citizens, including minorities, are protected and upheld. I keep repeating, and I will say this again to every Serb living in Kosovo. Kosovo is your home as much as it is mine. I want to work with each and every one of you to make it a home where you prosper and thrive and contribute to make it a better place for all. The Constitution and legislation in force provide for strong protections on the rights of Kosovo's Serb community to use their language at all levels, both national and local. The Serb language has the status of an official language in all the territory of Kosovo, while education as well as other services are guaranteed also in their language. Recognizing the profound significance of cultural heritage, our Constitution guarantees the Orthodox Church a special level of protection in our country, further cemented by the law on special zones, while independent and professional assessment confirm that Orthodox churches in Kosovo enjoy a high level of security. Yet, as I speak of enhanced and advanced rights for Kosovo Serbs and every minority community in Kosovo, ethnic cleansing through administrative means, as qualified by the Helsinki Committee for Human Rights, is ongoing in Serbia, more precisely in the Preševa Valley. Through the passivization of residence addresses, the Serbian government is tracelessly, that is even without issuing any written notice or document, wiping out Albanians from the civil registry of Serbia and as a result, denying them of all of their basic rights. These violations of rights, also confirmed by the US State Department reports, as well as some of the latest resolutions of the European Parliament, are further exacerbated by the hate speech and discriminatory language which is routinely used by media and politicians in Serbia. Dear members of the Council, justice. Justice is the centerpiece of our every action. Rule of law is the bedrock of our governance. It is shameful but also unacceptable how Serbia attempts to label our rule of law efforts as acts against Kosovo Serbs. This false play of the interethnic crime card to undermine our pursuit of justice is a strategy we fervently reject. We stand ready and very resolute in our resolve to combat crime and criminal organizations with an unwavering commitment that transcends ethnicity, religion, or any other background. A criminal is a criminal, no matter their nationality. In our relentless pursuit of justice, we adamantly uphold and unwaveringly adhere to highest standards of human rights. Anything contrary to this is not and will never be acceptable to us. And I have, as President, raised my voice every single time these standards were not upheld. Furthermore, it has now become a standard practice to have the presence of international community in a monitoring capacity in all of these processes. But to put things in perspective and to speak of the actual cases that are classified as cases of interethnic crime, I am proud to say that since 2008, the year of our independence, when the level of interethnic crime was a total of 63 cases that year, we have witnessed a trend of constant reduction over the years. In 2023, the total number of interethnic crimes is 19 cases, 19, out of which almost 70% consist of chanting, swearing, and graffitis. But we are committed, dear members, to bring that number down to zero. Let me be clear. In Kosovo, we have a shared endeavor, one that unites us in a common cause to safeguard and strengthen our collective future. As we navigate the path forward, we want to continue to build bridges and advance together toward a brighter tomorrow, one that not only fulfills our aspirations, but also secures the well-being of all of our citizens and communities. In our efforts to advance the rights of every community, and in this case the Serb minority community, I confirm that we are willing to do even more for the Serbs in Kosovo. But we will not give Serbia instruments through which they can destroy the lives of Serbs who live in Kosovo and try to continuously diminish our sovereignty and territorial integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, Kosovo, once a symbol of suffering because of the genocidal war waged by Milosevic, has emerged today as a shining example of democracy in the Western Balkans and beyond. Its remarkable journey has been recognized by international reports and publications showcasing the incredible strides the country has taken. With a vibrant civil society, a flourishing economy, and a resilient population, Kosovo stands as a testament to the transformative power of determination and the pursuit of democratic ideals. Its story of resilience and hope that proves that even in the most challenging circumstances, the ideals of democracy can be ignited and can flourish. International reports and publications have consistently highlighted Kosovo's remarkable democratic progress. Our commitment to human rights, rule of law, and good governance has garnered well-deserved praise with many observers such as Transparency International, World Justice Project, Freedom House, World Press Freedom Index, and VDEM lauding Kosovo as a model for other countries in the region. Kosovo stands out today for its remarkable progress in the fight against corruption, for rule of law, media freedom, political freedoms, and civil rights, as well as democratic elections. Obviously, these international organizations are showcasing the truth and not the propaganda that you have heard from Serbia today. As the youngest democracy in the Western Balkans, Kosovo has embraced its state-building journey with an unparalleled dedication to fostering an inclusive, transparent, and participatory democracy. Its successful endeavors in building a strong democratic foundations are an inspiration to the region and a symbol of what can be achieved when the pursuit of democracy takes center stage. In the face of any challenge, our people's resolve remains unshaken. We understand and cherish profoundly the value of our democracy and independence, and are fiercely proud of our state-building journey, a path marked by unwavering determination and sacrifice. Dear members of the Council, Serbia constantly pretends as if it is the authority to interpret international law. We all know that it is not. The final authority to do that is the International Court of Justice, which has unequivocally found that the Kosovo Declaration of Independence has not violated any applicable rule of international law. If I might add, this opinion was requested by Serbia itself, but they not only continue to deny it, but also violate it through their constant acts of aggression. And since today, we're led by the Brazilian presidents of the UN Security Council, I would like to honor the memory and legacy of one of the greatest minds of international public law and international humanitarian rights law, the former ICJ judge, the late Judge Trinidade of Brazil. In his opinion, in the case of Kosovo's declaration of independence before the ICJ, he stated, "No state can invoke territorial integrity in order to commit atrocities, nor perpetrate them on the assumption of state sovereignty, nor commit atrocities and then rely on a claim of territorial integrity, notwithstanding the sentiments and resentments of the people victimized. What has happened in Kosovo is that the victimized people have sought independence in reaction against systematic and long-lasting terror and oppression perpetrated in a flagrant breach of the fundamental principle of equality and non-discrimination. The basic lesson is clear. No state can use territory to destroy population. Such atrocities amount to an absurd reversal of the ends of the state, which was created and exists for human beings, and not vice versa." Judge Trinidade ends his opinion with the following: "States transformed into machines of oppression and destruction cease to be states in the eyes of their victimized population. Thrown into lawlessness, their victims sought refuge and survival elsewhere, in the jus gentium, in the law of the nations, and in our times, the law of the United Nations. I dare to nourish the hope that the conclusion of the present advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice will mark the closing chapter of yet another long episode of the timeless saga of humankind in search of emancipation from tyranny and systematic oppression." End of quote. We all had the hopes of Judge Trinidade. Unfortunately, as long as there are dictators who search for more territory rather than care about the people, we'll continue to face the challenges of tyranny. In the face of such challenges, we should never fall into the trap of both-sidism. We are witnessing a tendency to apply the principle of both-sidism when confronted with complex issues. This approach aims to appear balanced and impartial by giving equal weight to opposing perspectives. However, it also more often than not risks to lead to a fallacy that undermines the very essence of democracy. When we fail to unequivocally call evil by its true name, we risk to create space to moral equivalence between right and wrong, virtue and vice. This approach obscures the fundamental values and principles that democracies are built upon: justice, human rights, and the rule of law. In doing so, this opens the door to manipulation and deceit by authoritarian regimes, who exploit this reluctance to take a strong, principled stand against their actions. We have seen it in our part of the world, and we are seeing it in Ukraine. Authoritarians exploit the gray areas created by both-sidism, using it as a tool to sow confusion and weaken democratic institutions. In the face of an ever-growing bond between the world's autocrats, democracies must stand firm in their principles and values. for it is the only way to preserve their resilience and protect the democratic freedoms. In face of such hybrid actions through the act of aggression by Serbia, we ask our international partners for strategic clarity and determined actions to prevent acts of aggression by Serbia from ever happening again. In a resounding call for peace and security, our plea is clear and unyielding. Kosovo needs substantial security guarantees within the Euro-Atlantic security framework. As we move forward, we should focus on halting Serbia's support for terrorist activities against Kosovo, urging them to cooperate in the investigation of the recent terrorist attack and hand over to us the terrorists involved. Moreover, increase the security around Kosovo's border with Serbia and adopt clear measures against Serbia's leadership as a deterrence. A resolute message at this point would underscore a commitment to safeguarding peace and security in the entire region, but also in the entire European continent. Most importantly, it would showcase that the democratic world does not stand idle in the face of autocratic and hegemonic regimes. As President Biden recently said, you know, history has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to the rest of the world keep rising. Dear members of the Council, we must not let propaganda win. We must fight for the truth. There is only one truth that can be evidenced, and that is that Kosovo has been a victim of an act of aggression by Serbia. That Serbia is terrorizing Serbs who live in Kosovo for the sake of stopping their integration within Kosovo institutions and society. That Serbia wants Kosovo territory, which they will never get. That Kosovo is the constructive party in the dialogue with a track record of implementing the vast majority of its undertakings. And that Serbia's list of non-implementation is so long that it would take us many, many hours to just go through it. That we want a full and swift implementation of the entirety of the Brussels Agreement of February 27th in a fair and balanced way. That while we were committed to peaceful talks with Serbia, they resorted to use of force. That we want justice and accountability, and Serbia wants denial and impunity. That we want peace, and Serbia has shown on the 24th of September that they, unfortunately, want war. But we will not let them have it. As we all know, democracy and freedom always prevail, because there's nothing that can stand in the way of a freedom-loving nation. Because no matter how hard the hurdles, no matter how thorny the road, no matter how painful the sacrifice, the people of Kosovo will never, ever give up on their freedom. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Osmani Sadriou for her statement. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Monsieur le Président.
President, I would like to thank Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Mission in Kosovo, UNMIK, for her statement. The presence of their Excellencies, Prime Minister Brnabić and President Osmani among us today testifies to the importance of this meeting. The close relations between the Western Balkans region and Switzerland draws their strength both from a shared history of more than 30 years and from a present marked by strong personal ties. In consequence, we are all the more committed to a stable and prosperous region, and we support the European prospects of Kosovo and Serbia. President, the path towards a normalised and prosperous relationship between Kosovo and Serbia can be mapped out in 3 stages: de-escalation, a political solution, and confidence building, including through dealing with the past. De-escalation is urgent. Since our last meeting 6 months ago, uncertainty and tensions between Kosovo and Serbia have continued to grow. At the end of May, more than 90 KFOR soldiers were injured during demonstrations. A new level of violence was reached with the attack on the 24th of September, which claimed the life of a Kosovar policeman and again caused several injuries. Switzerland condemns these acts of violence and calls on Serbia and Kosovo to return to calm. All parties must refrain from using and promoting violence and from unilateral and provocative actions, such as the deployment of troops close to the border. Inflammatory rhetoric must give way to constructive behaviour in order to implement political solutions. Leaders must set an example. They are responsible for the language they use and the actions they take. Moreover, we call on all actors to cooperate fully with the investigation on the attack of the 24th of September so that the perpetrators are brought to justice. We welcome the close cooperation between the Kosovo police as the first responder and EULEX and KFOR. We reiterate our support for KFOR as one of the main guarantors of security. Switzerland calls on parties to engage fully in the dialogue facilitated by the European Union and to implement their commitments under the agreement on the path towards normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. This agreement represents the way forward to overcome differences and establish more peaceful relations. In support of the EU-led normalization process, Switzerland offers an informal framework in which high-level representatives of political parties from both countries can discuss concrete steps towards normalization. We furthermore welcome the important discussions that took place this weekend, and we hope that they will lead to concrete progress. We also reiterate that the participation of women and the integration of the gender perspective must be guaranteed throughout the process. Establishing a climate of trust, both between the parties to the dialogue and between the communities in Kosovo, is crucial. An important step in this direction is dealing with the past, which must benefit all communities, including the most marginalized, such as the Roma. We welcome the May Declaration on missing persons, and we actively support the search for and identification of missing persons. We are also encouraged by efforts to ensure that people who have suffered conflict-related sexual violence can live their lives with dignity, and we continue to support these efforts. President, in order to achieve lasting stability, the concerns of all of the inhabitants of Kosovo must be addressed. Switzerland thanks UNMIK for the work it has accomplished and remains ready to discuss constructively a possible strategic review of UNMIK. Building on our close relations, Switzerland continues to support Kosovo in its efforts to strengthen the rule of law and respect for human rights, taking into account the interests of all communities. The future of the Western Balkans lies in peaceful, multi-ethnic and prosperous societies. We will remain committed to this path. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, I welcome the presence at today's meeting, Her Excellency Brnabić, Prime Minister of Serbia, and her elaboration on the position of Serbia. I have listened carefully to the briefing by SRSG Ziadeh and the remarks by Ms. Osmani. China's position on the Kosovo issue is consistent and clear. We support the parties concerned in reaching a mutually acceptable solution to the Kosovo issue within the framework of the Security Council Resolution 1244 through dialogue and consultation. In this process, the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Serbia should be fully respected. There should be no double standards on this important issue. In connection with the briefing we just heard, I would like to highlight 4 points. First, for some time now, the situation in northern Kosovo continues to be volatile, with a high incidence of violent security incidents, which is a cause for deep concern. We oppose the unilateral actions of the Kosovo authorities, which raised tensions and worsened confrontation, and call upon them to return to the right track of dialogue and consultation. The NATO Kosovo force should effectively respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country concerned and genuinely do what is conducive to regional peace and stability. Second, the unity and mutual trust among the communities in Kosovo have always been fragile. Municipal institutions lacking Serb representation are not conducive to the harmonious coexistence of the various ethnic groups and do not meet the fundamental interests and development needs of the local people. We call upon the Kosovo authorities to take positive measures to reduce ethnic tensions and effectively respect and guarantee the legitimate rights of all communities. Third, since the beginning of this year, Serbia and Kosovo have held a number of high-level meetings with EU facilitation to discuss a political settlement of the Kosovo issue. We look forward to the early achievement of results from such engagement and discussions. China appreciates the mediation efforts of the EU in this regard. The establishment of the community of Serb municipalities is an important component of the Brussels Agreement. The Kosovo authorities should effectively fulfill their commitments and implement their obligations as soon as possible and take practical actions in this regard to remove obstacles to the process of dialogue between the two sides. Fourth, UNMIK plays an important role in stabilizing the situation in Kosovo and promoting national reconciliation. The UN and the Security Council should remain seized of and maintain input on the issue, support UNMIK to deliver its mandate fully, and the SRSG Ziade in her work. The Kosovo authorities should effectively respect and guarantee the security of UNMIK personnel and premises and facilitate the smooth operations of the mission. Mr. President, over 2 decades ago, Kosovo experienced a tragic war. And more than 100 years ago, what happened in the Balkans changed the course of history. We should never allow the tragedy to repeat itself. The world is already in chaos, so Kosovo should not add to it. The international community should work together to maintain security and stability in Kosovo and peace and security in the Balkans and promote strengthened dialogue and engagement between the two communities and their peaceful coexistence and a political settlement of the relevant issues. China is ready to work with all parties concerned to continue to make efforts and contributions to this end. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. I welcome the presence of Her Excellency Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of Serbia, and I'm grateful to the Special Representative, Ms. Caroline Ziade, for her report. We have noted the words of Ms. Vjosa Osmani. The latest report of the Secretary-General is not encouraging, given that the last 6 months have been marked by various disagreements between Belgrade and Pristina, and by a proliferating number of security incidents which have impacted negatively on the dialogue process and resulted in a deterioration of security on the ground. We condemn the events of last May and of last September, which led to civilian injuries and injuries to members of NATO. Ecuador calls upon all parties to behave responsibly at all times and to abstain from any action or rhetoric which could result in an increase of tension or could promote a conflict. Just last April, when this Council was considering this same matter, we commended the progress which had resulted in an agreement on the normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina and their implementing annex. It is therefore regrettable to hear that despite the efforts made during the high-level meeting facilitated by the High Representative of the European Union in September, the parties have failed to reach consensus on the sequencing modalities for the implementation of the agreement, and have also not reached consensus on de-escalating tensions in the north of the region. As the Secretary-General underscored, in order to achieve viable, sustainable agreements, both parties must maintain an open, transparent and inclusive process, which takes into account the various needs and expectations of all stakeholders, including women, young people, and civil society. President, peoples who are slaves of their past will never be masters of their future. It is, therefore, desirable for parties to commit to the EU-facilitated dialogue so as to find a sustainable solution to the situation in the north of this region, a solution which will smooth the way to the implementation of the agreement and its annexes. This includes starting the work to establish a community association of Kosovo Serb majority municipalities, as established in the first Brussels Agreement of over 10 years ago. We also call for all necessary measures to be adopted to implement the Declaration on Disappeared Persons. Establishing their whereabouts is a priority and would contribute to the reconciliation process and to strengthening confidence-building measures. Ecuador reiterates its support for a solution as stipulated in Resolution 1244 of 1999. We appreciate the committed work of Special Representative Ziadeh and the UNMIC personnel for dialogue and towards maintaining the stability of the region alongside international partners. We urge them to continue fostering initiatives aimed at building trust and cooperation. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Special Representative Ziadeh, for your briefing. I wish to welcome President Osmani and Prime Minister Brnabić to this meeting. Let me first reiterate the U.S. commitment to maintaining stability in the Western Balkans. My government strongly condemns the violence perpetrated by armed assailants on September 24 in the north of Kosovo, which led to the death of a Kosovo police officer. The September 24 attack revealed a direct threat to the safety of Kosovo citizens and put at risk NATO and EU personnel. There must be full accountability in accordance with the rule of law for perpetrators of the attack. Individuals who fled to third countries should be extradited or prosecuted as appropriate. The United States is working closely with the EU and NATO partners to help keep the north of Kosovo calm and to deter escalatory measures by either party. We caution both sides against uncoordinated or escalatory actions and urge their immediate return to the EU-facilitated dialogue, prepared to take concrete steps forward. It is important that the parties make progress in implementing all dialogue commitments. The United States continues to support the EU-facilitated dialogue as the best path to reconcile issues between Kosovo and Serbia. We will remain closely engaged in supporting our European partners' work in this regard. We also welcome the increased numbers and greater visibility of NATO's Kosovo force in the north of Kosovo. This presence should be sustained as long as needed. We commend the Kosovo Police Force for their response to the September 24 attack and for their close coordination with KFOR and the European Rule of Law Mission, both during the attack and during their investigations. We encourage Kosovo to continue coordination moving forward. Mr. President, recent events have once again shown that while there is a role the UN can play in Kosovo, it does not require Chapter 7 mandate to do so. UNMIC was not involved in the response to or investigation of the September 24 attack. UNMIC has long fulfilled its original purpose and no longer has a role in the governance of Kosovo or in its security. We again ask this Council to sunset the mission. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President. And I also thank Sarji Ziadeh for her comprehensive briefing and welcome the participation of President Osmani and Prime Minister Brambik to our meeting. Malta is deeply concerned by the recent developments in the north of Kosovo following last month's incidents. We condemn the terrorist attack against the Kosovo police that took place on 24 September and call for those responsible to be swiftly brought to justice and held accountable. Such acts of violence only serve to destabilize the situation and reverse hard-earned progress achieved on the path towards normalization and relations between both sides. Malta is also concerned about the deployment of Serbian military forces at the border with Kosovo, which constitutes a further escalation of the situation. We welcome that the number of troops has since been reduced and call on Serbia to cooperate fully in the ongoing investigation. Moving forward, we urge both sides to focus all efforts on de-escalating tensions and to refrain from any unilateral action or divisive rhetoric that could undermine the diplomatic efforts made during the past month. Dialogue is key in resolving outstanding issues, and collaboration is the only way to ensure peace and stability in the region. Positive steps to create an atmosphere conducive to reconciliation, good neighbourly relations, and further dialogue are of utmost importance at this juncture. The holding of local elections in the northern municipalities of Kosovo will be crucial, and we call on the full and unconditional participation of all players in the electoral process. Hate speech, vilification of women in politics, and physical or verbal attacks on journalists are unacceptable and deplorable. I take this opportunity to reiterate Malta's full support to Serbia and Kosovo's EU accession aspirations. The path to membership for both parties runs through the EU-facilitated dialogue. It is crucial that both sides commit and engage constructively to realize this goal. In this regard, we take good note of the progress achieved so far by Kosovo in its reform path and stress the importance of undertaking this process with the full participation of various stakeholders from within civil society, including vulnerable and marginalized communities. Malta also acknowledges the importance of the role of UNMIC in promoting security, stability, and the preservation and promotion of human rights, gender equality, and empowerment of women and youth in Kosovo. The normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia will not only foster peace in the area, but also lead to economic and social prosperity in the Western Balkans. Therefore, we stress the importance of both parties respecting the agreement on the path to normalization of relations agreed by both parties earlier this year and urge them to fulfill their respective obligations under it. In conclusion, President, Malta reaffirms its support for UNMIC in its efforts to engage all communities in Kosovo, as well as regional and international actors proactively and constructively. We urge Kosovo and Serbia to prioritize dialogue over confrontation and augur that the coming period will be marked with meaningful progress in the efforts to normalize relations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur. Thank you, President. I thank the Special Representative of the Secretary-General, Ms. Caroline Ziadeh, for her briefing, and I welcome the presence here of the Prime Minister, Mazam Brnavic, and the President of Kosovo, Mazam Usmani. Today's meeting is happening against a worrisome backdrop. The political and security situation is deteriorating in the north of Kosovo, and a number of incidents have happened over the last 6 months, some of which have affected members of KFOR. The events of the 24th of September are just the latest example of this. France roundly condemns the unacceptable attack against the police of Kosovo, which led to a death from amongst its ranks. France trusts that all light will be shed on the circumstances of this attack and that those responsible will be brought before justice. We call upon the parties to demonstrate restraint and to undertake the necessary efforts to ensure tensions are smoothed. President, this uptick in tension cannot be dissociated from the political dimension of the matter. In his report, the Secretary-General notes the lacklustre progress in implementing the Brussels-Ohrid agreements reached thanks to European Union mediation. We regret this situation. The current context means that both Serbia and Kosovo must rapidly and unconditionally return to EU-facilitated dialogue to normalise their relations. It is crucial to opt for the path of dialogue and compromise. We expect of the parties that they will engage unreservedly with a spirit of full responsibility and commitment in the implementation of all of the commitments made within the agreements concluded. This includes the implementation of a Kosovo Serb Majority Municipalities Association and the swift organisation of inclusive early elections in the north of Kosovo, in a calm environment and with the participation of Serbs. These various processes are key elements to bolster the European prospects of both countries. France remains fully attached to integration of the Western Balkans into the European Union as soon as possible. President, we commend UNMIK's commitment to enduring peace through its actions as part of its mandate to help bolster the rule of law, human rights, dialogue and reconciliation between the communities. Its actions for women and young people, which have achieved progress, are also welcome. We congratulate the mission for its work to raise awareness against child marriages and its support for the return of refugees and displaced persons. President, France remains strongly attached to seeking lasting normalisation of relations in Serbia and Kosovo. France will continue to mobilise to foster rapid progress in this regard, in support of the EU-facilitated dialogue and the efforts being carried out by UNMIK, KFOR and ULEX. The dispute can only be resolved by means of peace, respect and dialogue. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Mr. President, I thank Special Representative of the Secretary General, Ms. Caroline Diade, for her briefing. Since its establishment in 1999, the UNMIK has played a critical role in supporting Kosovo. Japan commends UNMIK staff for their commitment, and we thank SRC Diade for her leadership and active engagement with local and international partners to promote mutual trust at the grassroots level, including 40 multi-ethnic events. Mr. President, we express a serious concern over the growing tensions in the north of Kosovo. We call on both parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from taking unilateral actions that could lead to further escalation. Japan strongly condemns the series of violent acts, especially Baniska attacks in late September. The perpetrators must be held accountable via an impartial investigation. The security situation in the north of Kosovo needs to be stabilized to avoid a new crisis on the ground. We, therefore, welcome the recent decision to bring reinforcements by the KFOR, which continues to play an important role for stability and security in Kosovo. Securing the environment for Serbs returning to join the Kosovo police and Kosovo institutions will be helpful. Japan strongly urges both parties to recommit engaging in the EU-facilitated Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, which is essential to peace and stability in the Western Balkans. We call on them to fully implement swiftly and in good faith their respective obligations under the agreements achieved in the dialogue to normalize relations between Serbia and Kosovo. Mr. President, as mentioned earlier, the UNMIK continues to make meaningful efforts at confidence building in the region. We also recognize that the situation in Kosovo is very different from when the UNMIK was established in 1999. Therefore, the UNMIK's role should be reviewed in order to adapt to the current situation. Japan stands ready to work with all stakeholders to achieve peace, stability, and reconciliation in the region. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
Mr. President, I thank SRSG Caroline Ziada for her valuable briefing today. I welcome the participation of Prime Minister Berna Beach and President Osmani Sadriou in today's meeting. When the Council last met on this file in April, there was hope for greater stability and prosperity in the region. Indeed, in that session, the United Arab Emirates stated, and I quote, "The recent agreement between Serbia and Kosovo is the most significant breakthrough in relations between both states in over a decade. The conversations around the future of both countries and their relationship with one another had notably shifted, leading to the EU-facilitated Ohrid and Brussels agreements. These landmark agreements offered the promise of a new chapter for the peoples of both countries. They were followed by the joint declaration on missing persons, which was endorsed in May. Yet, throughout this year, the situation on the ground in northern Kosovo began to fray. Following a difficult election period, violence erupted in late May, during which dozens of KFOR peacekeepers, as well as law enforcement officials and civilians, were wounded. We condemn all attacks against peacekeepers. And there was a collective feeling of fear and uncertainty when the world witnessed the events of 24th of September, during which a policeman was killed and others wounded. The UAE condemns attacks on law enforcement officials and shares its condolences with the families of those killed and injured. The rule of law must prevail, and all those responsible must be held to account. What took place 1 month ago risked pulling the region back to a darker time in its history. Following these events, as we saw leaders work to de-escalate the situation, we were reminded that peace is not simply the passive absence of fighting, but also the culmination of concerted action. Dialogue and diplomacy take courage, and we commend the steps taken by the leadership of Kosovo and Serbia to de-escalate. At the same time, momentum must continue in the implementation of the agreements made under the auspices of the EU-facilitated dialogue. The UAE reiterates its full support for the dialogue, which remains the best means of resolving outstanding issues. In this regard, we welcome the recent high-level meetings that took place as part of the EU-facilitated dialogue. Now, it is more important than ever for both sides to refocus on constructive dialogue and avoid those who would engage in inflammatory rhetoric that will only exacerbate tensions. Any hope for peace in the future requires building trust. In light of this, we appreciate and encourage the continued efforts of UNMIK at building confidence and trust between communities in Kosovo in coordination with the government and community leaders. Mr. President, as our last statement on this file during our Security Council term, let me reiterate that for our part, the UAE remains fully committed to supporting all concerted efforts towards peace and prosperity for the peoples of Serbia and Kosovo. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Gabon.
Thank you, President, for giving me the floor, and I'd like to thank Special Representative of the Secretary General, Ms. Caroline Ziade, for her comprehensive briefing. I welcome the participation in today's meeting of Ms. Vice President Ms. Ana Berbic, and Prime Minister of Serbia, and also the President of Kosovo, Ms. Osmani Sadriou. President, since our meeting in April, the situation in Kosovo has hardly improved. Tensions, clashes, and the numerous episodes of violence, many of which involving elements of the Kosovo police, have led to fears of a conflagration. The day-to-day life of the people of different communities is far too often marked by scuffles and clashes. This has led to the need for deployment of a extra NATO battalion and also a multinational reserve force battalion to contain the situation. It is, however, clear that while the causes of these recurrent episodes of violence persist, de-escalation will remain difficult to reach and security will remain a pipe dream. Following a mass resignation of thousands of Serbs of Kosovo from local institutions, as well as a boycott of municipal elections, which were held in December 2022 in the north, there must be a sustainable legal solution found to this to rebuild trust and promote coexistence. Indeed, the creation of a statute for the community of Serbian municipalities in Kosovo is crucial. We call on the Pristina authorities to implement the Brussels Agreement from 2013 on this, which would be a decisive step towards normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina. My country regrets that parties have not been able to reach an agreement on a draft statute for the community of municipalities, which was presented at the beginning of May, and that the various tentatives to relaunch dialogue have not succeeded. We recognise the important role played by the European Union, as well as other regional and bilateral actors, and we urge them to pursue their activities to overcome misunderstanding and the blockages that persist, as well as to build consensus with a view to continuing negotiations. In this connection, we call on parties to consider the 9-point plan of the OSCE to address this political deadlock. Amongst the efforts and confidence-building mechanisms, we welcome the creation of the Barabar Centre with the support of UNMIK, as well as the numerous different types of actions that UNMIK is carrying out in the fields of justice, human rights, art, economic integration, the environment, and support for young people, women, and minority communities. This commitment seeks to strengthen the rights of non-majority communities, as women and young people, particularly through the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda on the one hand, and Youth, Peace and Security Agenda on the other. These are essential contributions to build lasting peace and support peaceful coexistence of all communities. And we know that in the context of Kosovo, this is a peace that will stem from communities. In order to do so, parties must suppress hate speech, stigmatization, marginalization, all types of violence, and refrain from any unilateral action and any fait accompli which undermine political efforts. Along the same lines, violence and attacks against religious symbols must end, and return solutions must be offered to the thousands of the non-majority communities who have been internally displaced in Kosovo or refugees abroad. We encourage the work of the HCR in this area, and we take note of the most recent voluntary returns that have been recorded. President, the adoption of a shared declaration from Belgrade and Pristina, which is a welcome development that we commend. Parties should ensure that it is effectively implemented, respecting the dignity and beliefs of each community. We take note, moreover, of the ongoing cases relating to war crimes linked to the war in Kosovo. This is crucial. It would guarantee truth, justice and reparation and the non-repetition. And for peace to be established, which, in our view, would contribute to a level of justice, it is crucial to keep sight, as we seek solutions, keep sight of the relevant resolutions of the Security Council, particularly Resolution 1244, which was adopted in 1999, and also ensure the respect for the principles of the UN Charter, particularly the respect for territorial integrity of states. On the political front, a way out must be found to overcome the current deadlock and calm tensions which has only worsened in recent months, particularly because of violence, particularly police violence. We took note of the will expressed by the authorities of Kosovo to organise early municipal elections in the north. My country encourages the continuation of a good faith dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. We take note also of the agreement from the 27th of February on the path towards normalisation. To conclude, my country encourages parties to keep dialogue open in order to find a political solution through negotiation. The EU, regional organisations and sub-regional organisations, as well as bilateral partners led by the Quint, must also maintain a highest level of engagement to diffuse antagonism and allow for progress that is acceptable for the parties. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the representative of Gabon for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
Thank you, President. I would like to welcome the participation of the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, Her Excellency Ms. Ana Brnabić. We thank the Secretary General for his latest report on the activities of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, and also thank Ms. Caroline Zede, Special Representative and Head of UNMIC, for her important briefing and continuing leadership of United Nations efforts in the Kosovo region. My delegation also takes note of the remarks made by Ms. Osmani Sadri. Mr. President, at the outset, let me reiterate Ghana's continuing support for the mandate of UNMIC. Given the continuing political conditions in the region, the role of UNMIC in promoting security, stability, and respect for human rights remains vital. We also welcome UNMIC-led initiatives for trust-building, social cohesion, and enhanced intercommunal engagements. We note and urge further support for UNMIC's engagement with the women and youth aimed at enhancing their role in peace-building and supporting resilience-building measures at the community level. The decision to integrate the women, peace and security agenda and incorporate gender perspectives into the normalization process would enhance the chances of restoring peace, stability, and economic growth in the region. We note with concern, however, the violation of UNMIC offices and reiterate the inviolability of its premises and assets. We urge all necessary measures to ensure the unimpeded operations of the mission. Mr. President, on the political front, we note with concern the persistent tensions that impede the further implementation of the 27th February Normalization Agreement and its implementation annex of 18th March. We continue to believe that the agreement offers a renewed opportunity for achieving a comprehensive normalization of relations between Serbia and the Kosovo region, necessary for long-term peace and security and prosperity in the Balkan region. Therefore, in welcoming the establishment of the Joint Monitoring Committee as an important step, we believe that further efforts are needed for its operationalization and advancing the normalization between the two sides. We appreciate the sustained support of the European Union and urge continuing efforts to resolve concerns surrounding sequencing modalities which have stalled progress in this direction. Mr. President, my delegation firmly believes that dialogue and diplomacy offer the best chances for resolving the long-standing disputes between the Kosovo region and Serbia, and we welcome in this regard the role of regional actors in support of de-escalation. We urge all authorities to refrain from unilateral actions and inflammatory rhetoric, which in some instances have resulted in violent clashes leading to needless civilian casualties. The parties must continue to remain committed to dialogue in good faith with the aim of reaching mutually agreed pathways for achieving the objectives of normalization and peaceful coexistence. We continue to be concerned about the persistent tensions in northern Kosovo region. The tensions and violent escalations reported by the Secretary General are emblematic of a deeply divided society. We therefore call for the intensification of confidence and trust-building efforts to help assuage deep-seated grievances which stand in the way of reason and mutual cooperation. Our delegation has consistently urged the non-politicization of the issue of missing persons, and we welcome the understanding reached by the two sides to address the issue as a humanitarian concern. We believe such an approach is necessary to accelerate action to uncover the facts about the 1,600 missing persons who have remained unaccounted for the past 25 years. Mr. President, in closing, let me reaffirm the importance of United Nations efforts in support of a comprehensive and lasting solution to the decades-long problem. We also reiterate the need for all peace efforts in the Kosovo region to be based on the principles of international law and the values of the United Nations. We reiterate once more that all sides must demonstrate an unprecedented level of commitment and good faith in the normalization process. Greater efforts are certainly required for the full and effective implementation of the EU-facilitated Ohrid and Brussels agreements and earlier commitments in the wider interest of the people and the Balkan region. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Ghana for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Mozambique.
Mr. President, Mozambique wishes to thank the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Ms. Caroline Ziad, for her important briefing and update on the situation in Kosovo. We welcome in this chamber the participation of Her Excellency Ms. Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia. Mr. President, Mozambique welcomes and encourages the diplomatic efforts of the UNMIC, particularly by actively working with partners to sustain peace and supporting several initiatives, including the promotion of security, stability, and respect for human rights in Kosovo and in the region. We note that despite the numerous challenges, UNMIC continues to its constructive engagement with Kosovo and Serbia and regional and international actors facilitated by the European Union. We commend these efforts aimed at normalizing relations between Serbia and Kosovo, as well as creating a conducive environment towards regional peace and stability. In this context, we strongly urge national, regional, and international partners to do the utmost to preserve the progress achieved over the years towards peace and reconciliation in Kosovo, in line with the Security Council Resolution 1244 of 1999. Mr. President, despite the enormous efforts being made on the ground, aptly detailed by the Special Representative of the Secretary General in our briefing, we remain concerned over the discord and tension between Belgrade and Pristina authorities. This contributes to the deterioration of the security situation that is characterized by violence, provocations, arrests, protests involving civilians, journalists, and members of the Kosovo forces. These security incidents in the region have the potential of jeopardizing the implementation of the Brussels Agreement and are a threat to peace, stability, and security that we want to prevail in the region. This situation is also being aggravated by tensions between the two sides, with mutual accusations of non-compliance of the agreement. We strongly reiterate our call to both the Serbian and Kosovan sides to launch the necessary foundations for a genuine dialogue aimed at promoting reconciliation between their respective communities, to refrain from acts that instigate violence and tensions so that mutual trust can be built. Mr. President, we call on the parties and all relevant actors to continue engaging in the promotion of a constructive dialogue in Kosovo. This is a key to the successful implementation of the Brussels Agreement facilitated by the European Union. It is crucial to continue supporting the ongoing efforts to strengthen dialogue between the parties. We urge that any military incident or confrontation be avoided. Should any occur, it must be investigated in an impartial and transparent manner, and the promoters should be held accountable. This will foster a better and credible political process. The inclusion of all stakeholders, such as women, youth, and civil society, is extremely important to promote peace, not only in Kosovo, but also in the region. Mozambique reiterates our support to the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo and to all efforts by regional actors aimed at finding peace and stability in Kosovo and in the region. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Mozambique for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we are grateful to the Special Representative of the Secretary-General, Caroline Ziade, for her briefing on the situation in the province and for her assessments that she shared. We welcome the participation of Prime Minister of Serbia, Ana Brnabić, and we listened to the views of Ms. Vjosa Osmani, particularly surprised by her insistence and perhaps clumsy attempts to bring Russia in on what is happening in Kosovo and mention that. Your attempts presenting Kosovo as the heart of democracy against this unfortunate autocracy in the province could only give light to sarcastic responses. In the half year that's elapsed since the last Security Council meeting on Kosovo, the situation in the province has significantly deteriorated. The reason, as ever, efforts of the so-called Pristina authorities to establish full control over the Serb-populated north of the province. In April, Pristina brought its own proteges to power in 4 non-Albanian municipalities. They were elected at a pseudo vote, which was boycotted by Serbs. Despite the meagre turnout, 3.47%, due to the Albanian minority, the USA and the EU recognized the elections as sound. As a direct consequence, there was the new mayor's de facto seized administrative buildings, accompanied by special forces of Kosovo, which led to a serious spike in violence at the end of May. It's particularly concerning that the NATO-led Kosovo force, KFOR, this time again stood alongside the Kosovo-Albanian forces, and KFOR personnel tried to disperse Kosovan Serbs who were peacefully protesting at the administrative buildings of the municipality in Zvečan on the 29th of May. This was then used by Kosovo Albanians who opened fire on civilians with automatic rifles. There were injured people on both sides, and it was a question of luck that there were no casualties. In words, the West condemned this overreach of Albin Kurti and approved some disciplinary measures. However, these measures are simply superficial. The reality in the north of Kosovo is particularly grim. There is almost daily acts of intimidation, arrests of Serbs, attacks on peoples and their property. Since they took power, the ultra-nationalist self-determination movement in 2021, 420, and perhaps even more now, ethnically motivated attacks have been carried out on Serbs. It's particularly shocking also are cases of barbaric burning of returning refugees' homes. In recent months, there has been at least 2 of this kind of incident. The dispute around the Visoki monastery has yet to be resolved. Without justification, it has been denied the right to ownership of its surrounding territory. There are ongoing arbitrary expropriations of Serb-owned land in the north of the province for the construction there of bases for the Kosovan police. Now the northern regions of Kosovo are under a de facto blockade. There is a ban on the import of goods from central Serbia, and this is bringing the situation towards a humanitarian catastrophe. There is not enough vaccines for children, including newborns. There's not enough medicine for cancer and other patients. The Kosovan Mitrovic hospital's oxygen supplies are running low, and the Prime Minister of Serbia mentioned this herself. All of the aforementioned presents Pristina in an unflattering light. In order to distract from this and to once again place responsibility for everything that happened on Belgrade, the incident that happened on the north of the province in Bandkans on the 24th of September has been exaggerated. As a result, 3 local Serbs died and a Kosovo-Albanian police officer too. We have a lot of questions on what happened. First of all, it is not clear why international presence held back. Previously, in similar situations, EU rule of law mission patrols and also the NATO forces immediately headed to the zone of tension to separate fighting sides and launch a negotiation process. Now the situation was completely handed over to the Kosovo Albanians, which led to this tragic end. It's noteworthy that, in the day of the incident in the West, they decided not to wait for the first results of the investigation and immediately called the events an egregious and heinous act of terrorism. The Kosovan Albanians spread disinformation that their police officers was allegedly shot by Serbs supported by Belgrade. But then only later they were forced to recognize that this person died because of the detonation of an explosive device. Then the Serbs who had stopped resisting were killed, not in crossfire, but they were shot at point-blank range. Essentially, here we have attempts to slander Belgrade. Those attempts are dangerous because Pristina is receiving carte blanche to strengthen the repression of the Serb population in the province. We are convinced that if this arbitrariness does not end, the consequences will only be terrible, in even a return of armed conflict. This trend towards open confrontation is also shown by the illegitimate reorganization of the Pristina security forces into a quasi-army and their provision with modern weapons and military hardware, and training of Kosovo-Albanian personnel at the American-based Bond Steel, which initially had exactly the opposite purpose. It was for peacekeeping purposes. The fact that these steps are brazenly violating Security Council Resolution 2044, Western weapons donors prefer not to think about that. In this context, it is indicative also that Pristina declares a line of succession between the police and the Kosovo Liberation Army, a terrorist organization, the leaders of which, including Hashima Taci, is currently accused in a case of serious war crimes in the specialized court in The Hague. We trust that this structure will not repeat the errors of the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, and all those found guilty will be duly punished. In this context, the refusal of Pristina, running against decisions of the court in Hague, to pay compensation to the victims of crimes committed by fighters of the Kosovo Liberation Army speaks volumes. Western pandering only stokes the greater Albanian ambitions of the quasi-PM Kurti, going far beyond the province's borders. He's trying to destabilize the region of central Serbia with a Muslim population and encouraging a centrifugal tendency in North Macedonia. And the maps in circulation of Greater Albania also affect the territorial integrity of Montenegro and Greece. President, we draw your attention to the fact that how, in these circumstances, Western countries are trampling on international legal foundation for a resolution. Mediators from Washington and the EU clumsily present the wounded Serbs with one-sided schemes for a successful compromise. The much-vaunted agreement on the path to normalization scorns the inherent interests of Serbia and calls on them to recognize the sovereignty of Kosovo. In addition to all of this, it is presented as if resolution Security Council from the Security Council 12424 north of Brussels agreements didn't exist, and the process of normalization started only with the oral agreements from February-March of this year. In parallel to this, the province's application for the Council of Europe is being promoted, and Kosovars have also been promised that from the 1st of January 2024 the EU visa liberation scheme will enter into force. It's clear that the absolute indulgence to Albin Kurti from the side of his mentors allowed him to, with impunity, sabotage the most unconditional obligation to create a community of Serb municipalities in Kosovo. In Pristina, they state that the CSM is allegedly dead, but at the same time they are calling for the drafting of the statute of this community to be led by Washington, who is categorically against the granting Serbs in Kosovo any executive powers. In this connection, we'd like to underscore that until a CSM is created in its original form, talking about security for the Serb population in the province is not possible, and a sustainable resolution to all of this would be inconceivable. The initial step should be, for de-escalation should be the withdrawal of Kosovo, Albanian so-called special forces from the north of the province, dismantling its bases and posts. It's also important to return for the KFOR to return to its mandate, which is clearly set forth in Resolution 1244. This fundamental document for international legal parameters to find a sustainable and fair solution to Kosovo is the only option. There is no alternative. It should be acceptable for Belgrade and be approved by the Security Council. The work of UNMIK is still much needed, preserving its staffing and financial capacity. We draw your attention to the fact that the Kosovo Albanians complicit in the detention on 28th of May in 2019 of UNMIK staff member Krasnochokov, and the seriously injuring him have not been brought to justice. Another staff member of UNMIK, Antonov, on the 31st of December 2021, in an unlawful decision, a declaration by the province's authorities was declared person non grata. Without an adequate response, this kind of steps could be taken against any UN personnel in other corners of the world. It's only a question of time. Attempts to remove the Kosovan file from the Security Council agenda is unacceptable. What was said by we remember what was said by some of our colleagues who tried to convince the Council that nothing serious is happening in Kosovo. The situation there is not a question of peace and security, and thematic Security Council meetings should be held only once a year rather than twice. Then, how events have unfolded in September is clear to everyone. Regular discussion of the situation in Kosovo in current circumstances should remain on the Council's agenda. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Mr. President, and let me welcome the President of the Republic of Kosovo, Vjosa Osmani, and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, Ana Brnabić, to this meeting. I thank SRG Zjere for her detailed briefing. Mr. President, let me start with some good news, despite a somewhat blurred horizon during these last months. In January next year, the people of Kosovo will, like every other nation in the continent, enjoy the freedom of movement in the Schengen area, a process long overdue. Visa liberalization and increased human mobility have proven to have a huge transformative power anywhere they have been applied. This is part of the rapprochement with the EU's freedoms and its core values, which Kosovo, a functioning and ever-strengthening democracy, has fully embraced. Mr. President, when we speak about the still unresolved relations between Kosovo and Serbia, and after the divergent views that we heard here from some speakers, it is always important to put things in the right context. In a not too distant past, Kosovo and Serbia have been part of an ensemble that no longer exists. The dissolution of the former Yugoslavia was cruel and brutal. The Kosovo chapter of that dissolution in 1999 had nothing in common with a difficult divorce. The separation of Kosovo and Serbia went through the worst: war crimes and crimes against humanity, the death of countless civilians that mass graves continue to reveal to this day, through mass torture and widespread rape that can never be forgotten. It required an international intervention to stop atrocities and open a new page for the entire region. Needless to say, it has left behind bitter memories that are hard to erase, wounds not easy to heal, and scars that are still visible, including as many as 1,600 persons still unaccounted for. It is undeniable. In the course of the last 2 decades, the region has gone a long way to overcome the demons of the past. It has largely succeeded, but there is still a lot of work to do. I was sincerely surprised to listen and to say the least, to listen to the Prime Minister about her analysis on the situation in Kosovo. I checked the title of the meeting to make sure that we were not by any twist of chance in a meeting about Syria. None of these three elements that you mentioned, Prime Minister, is reflected, as you said, in the report of the Secretary General. None of them in the report of the OSCE, and none of them in the ULEX report. And they all live, work in Kosovo. There may be problems and issues, of course, like everywhere, in all our countries, including for lack of wearing the seat belts or turning right to the signal. But no one can, in full honesty, deny that there are laws, modern laws, that there are institutions, democratic institutions, and there is due process equal for everyone in Kosovo today. Colleagues, no matter how hard we try, we cannot undo the past and its miseries. But despite everything, we must move on and be forward-looking. As President Osmani said, turning pain to strength. This has been and continues to be Albania's investment, not any fantasy, as we heard from the Russian colleagues, like Greater Albania or I don't know what. We don't want territory of the others, like some do. It is a fact that a quarter of a century later, the Western Balkans are no longer the Balkans. And Balkanization has been replaced with Europeanization because the region has reconnected with its core identity, which is Europe. And it is upon this conviction that I profoundly believe that despite the bitter past, the region has reached that transformative point when, in our part of Europe, like elsewhere in the continent, there is only talk of progress, cooperation, compromise, free movement and open spaces, connectivity with little of no borders, talk of a common destiny with far more positive prospects than warring aspects. For the first time in our long and troubled history, there is a clear pathway to a common future, individually and collectively, which was once again confirmed in the very convincing and committing way last week in Tirana during the 10th EU Western Balkan Summit in the framework of the Berlin process, the first ever held, organized outside the EU. We need to hold firm to it, not to let it slip, not to waste it. Precisely because if we don't, the demons of the past or any incomprehensible of the present may be tempted to jeopardize it. And let me briefly share my worry as well. As it was mentioned, on the 24th of September, Kosovo experienced what was thought inconceivable. The SRSG called it a security incident. The European Parliament qualified it in a resolution a terrorist act. A military commander, carefully prepared and trained in Serbia, ready to fan the flames of the worst in the history of the Balkans, attacked Kosovo and its institutions and killed a police officer in the line of duty. Thanks to the prompt and professional intervention by the Kosovo police, the damage was contained and the terrorist mob was quickly pushed back. The more we learn about it, the more difficult it becomes not to see a pattern between these events and the déjà vu elsewhere. Remember the story of heavily armed men in help of a fabricated narrative of a discriminated minority. The enterprise failed miserably, and that is the positive side. But its intentions remained frightening nonetheless, and that is the deeply worrying side. There are no fighting sides, as we heard in this incident. There was a terrorist mob on one hand, and the police of an independent country preserving law and order on the other. That has to be clear. So critical questions regarding their plans, preparations, training, support, financing need to be answered quickly and convincingly. Because explanations so far, including today, fall short of credibility. Even more so when criminals who should have been immediately condemned were rashly honored. Glorification of criminals, genocide denials, and efforts to revisit history are wrong and unacceptable. They undermine the principles of justice, ethics, and morality, and have detrimental effects on the society of the countries concerned as they run against reconciliation efforts. Therefore, a full and thorough investigation is needed, as called for by many, including my country, including a recent resolution of the European Parliament, so that the truth and responsibility are promptly and clearly established, perpetrators held to account, and make sure that no one thinks again to go down that slippery and dangerous slope. Mr. President, this is the last meeting on the issue during our term in the Council. Next year will mark a quarter of a century since Kosovo and Serbia parted their ways for good. They will never be under the same roof again, They will always be neighbors, and I hope, and we work for good neighbors. Reconciliation is always an arduous and complex process. It must rely on goodwill and vision, but also on accountability and justice. It may be fragile, especially knowing that extremists surfing on populist narratives may try to derail it. In February last year, Kosovo and Serbia agreed to normalize relations with a binding agreement brokered by the EU, concluded in Ohrid and in Brussels. While implementation has been slow, we welcome the establishment of a joint monitoring committee. It should be fully functioning. And we welcome also the declaration on missing persons, a crucial process to bring closure to the pain of those concerned. The agreement must be implemented quickly and fully. Those who stand in the way of the process of the dialogue of normalization between Kosovo and Serbia must be resisted. Those who think that they can solve issues with manipulations, threat or war games must be sanctioned. And those who want to gamble and hijack the future of Serbia and Kosovo as neighbors living in peace and cooperation, which impacts the entire region, must be held to account. It is imperative to look forward, to project forward and move forward. And as we heard today by President Osmani, Kosovo is fully committed to implement the agreement by walking the extra mile in line with their Euro-Atlantic aspirations. We expect Serbia to do the same and in good faith for its own sake, that of the region, and for the future we all need and want. Mr. President, let me end by quoting John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who said that change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past are certain to miss the future. Too much time has been lost, and too much precious time has been wasted. Failure to move on has a price, and the price tag will be billed to the next generation. The EU-mediated dialogue is therefore a priceless opportunity that is to the detriment of no one and to the benefit of all, Kosovo, Serbia, and the entire region. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. Let me begin by thanking Special Representative Ziadeh for her briefing. I welcome the participation at our meeting of Her Excellency Ms. Osmani, President of Kosovo, and Her Excellency Ms. Brnabić, Prime Minister of Serbia. The United Kingdom is a long-standing supporter of Kosovo as an independent and sovereign state. We welcome the government's continued progress on important issues such as the rule of law, transitional justice, and tackling organised crime and corruption. We fully support the Declaration on Missing Persons, endorsed by both Kosovo and Serbia. This is a priority issue and should not be politicised. We also echo the mission's call for the government of Kosovo to implement the 2016 ruling of the Constitutional Court of Kosovo regarding the Dachani Monastery's property. This would send a positive signal to minority communities and demonstrate Kosovo's commitment to an inclusive, multi-ethnic future. President, we also remain deeply concerned by the immediate security challenges in the north of Kosovo. We strongly condemn the attacks on international personnel in May and on Kosovo police on 24 September. It is vital that those responsible are brought to justice. We call on Serbia to cooperate fully with the investigations underway and to take steps to address cross-border organised crime and arms smuggling. Kosovo must be able to implement the rule of law across the whole of its territory, in close coordination with ULEX and KFOR. We are proud to have deployed approximately 600 UK soldiers to Kosovo in response to a request from NATO to help fulfil KFOR's mandate to maintain a safe and secure environment in Kosovo. At this time of heightened tension, the normalisation of relations between Kosovo and Serbia remains vital. We urge both parties to engage with the EU-facilitated dialogue to find mutually acceptable solutions and end the cycle of instability, and protect hard-fought gains of the last decade. We call on Kosovo and Serbia to honour their commitments and avoid unilateral actions or rhetoric that could reduce prospects for a comprehensive normalisation agreement. And we urge both parties to engage constructively, including on the establishment of an association of Serb-majority municipalities as soon as possible. Finally, President, we recognise the vital role that UNMIK has played in the significant progress Kosovo has made since Resolution 1244. But conditions on the ground are unrecognisable from 1999. We believe it is time to renew UNMIK's role and responsibilities. This would enable the Council to take a fresh look at how the mission can adapt to serve the current conditions in Kosovo. In closing, let me reiterate the UK's gratitude to the Special Representative and the mission for all their work and for the professional implementation of their mandate. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Brazil. I thank the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Caroline Ziadeh, for her briefing. I also welcome the presence of the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia and acknowledge the participation of Ms. Osmania Sadriu. We followed events of recent weeks in the region with great concern. Once again, tensions between communities resulted in violence. We regret the deaths of 4 people near the Banjiska monastery on September the 24th and hope that those involved will be held accountable for their actions. Brazil offers its solidarity to the families of the victims and those injured in the incident. We believe that the current situation on the ground poses serious risks to regional stability, threatening important achievements in the course of the dialogue mediated by the European Union. We urge the parties to take all measures within their power to avoid further clashes and to exert their influence within their respective communities to urge moderation. We strongly encourage their leaders to demonstrate, by the example of their words, their willingness to maintain peace. Rebuilding trust between the two sides will necessarily involve a solution to the representation crisis in northern Kosovo. Behind the boycott of local institutions and the April municipal elections, there are reasonable concerns which deserve respectful consideration and understanding. It is essential to call new municipal elections in order to restore the legitimacy of local institutions and representatives. Brazil reiterates the call for the prompt establishment of the Association Community of Serbian-majority municipalities in Kosovo in accordance with the Brussels agreements without preconditions or further delay. We encourage parties to adhere to their commitments to respecting sites of historical, cultural, or religious significance and to preserving freedom of movement. Finally, we commend UNMIK for its role in preventing conflict and combating disinformation and hateful language. Brazil believes that the mission continues to be an important instrument for preserving stability on the ground and for seeking a final and mutually acceptable settlement of the question. Thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. There are no more Council speakers on the list. The Prime Minister of Serbia has asked for the floor. I will give her the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I will immediately start by saying that I could probably respond to what Ms. Osmani said, as well as Albanian ambassador, for a couple of hours. But I will give you a few examples just to show how it looks like in words and in practice. We heard from Ms. Osmani Kosovo is constructive and committed to dialogue. What we did not hear, though, is why didn't Kosovo implement the Brussels Agreement and establish the Community of Serbian Municipalities for more than 10 years? More than 10 years. That is how constructive and committed they in fact are. Belgrade has done everything that was proclaimed by the Brussels Agreement. Pristina did not implement a single word. That is how constructive and committed they are. Secondly, Serbs enjoy veto rights. You heard that, right? Well, this is how Serbs enjoy veto rights. They have veto rights on paper. However, when the so-called Kosovo Parliament decided on the establishment of the Kosovo Security Forces, Serbs who were supposed to vote, or unless they did not vote, then the Kosovo Security Forces could not have been established. Serbs did not vote. You know what? The Kosovo Security Forces were in fact established. That is how the veto rights of Serbs works in practice. You heard that Serbian Orthodox churches enjoy high level of security. Or, let me be clear, you did not hear Serbian Orthodox churches. You heard Orthodox churches. That is how respected and valued they are. Their so-called president, the president of the so-called Republic of Kosovo, cannot even pronounce Serbian. She said Orthodox churches, not Serbian Orthodox churches. And they are, in fact, Serbian Orthodox churches. So, she cannot even say it. And let me tell you how Serbian Orthodox churches are protected and enjoy high level of security. First, Google Visoki Dečani. Do not trust me. Google Visoki Dečani, one of the most important monasteries of Serbian Orthodox Church and Serbian people in Kosovo and Metohija. You will find the first thing, inclusion of the Dečani monastery on the 2021 list of 7 most endangered heritage sites in Europe. That is how secure and protected they are. This is Europa Nostra. It's not Ana Brnabić and it's not Serbia. Land ownership, Visoki Dečani. In May 2016, Kosovo Constitutional Court confirmed the Dečani monastery's ownership of several hectares of land. Despite this legal decision, 7 years later, court's decision still has not been implemented. And Visoki Dečani Monastery is the only religious site in the world that is under the constant protection of military forces, fully armed NATO KFOR forces, for more than 20 years. That is how secure they are. Then you heard that Serbia is in fact terrorizing Serbs and Pristina is protecting them, which is, I guess, why 11% of Serbs, or 2,000 Serbian families, left Kosovo and Metohija only since May this year, and left where? To central Serbia, which is terrorizing them. And left from who? Who did they run away from? You, who are protecting them. So Serbia is terrorizing Serbs. Can you imagine? That is, in all honesty, what we heard today. Then we heard that Kosovo is a shining example of democracy and rule of law. However, we did not hear how come that same Kosovo is the world champion in the least number of returnees of all the post-conflict territories. When they're so fantastic, when they're a shining example, when there is rule of law, when there is security, when there are veto rights, how come that people are not going back? Because when they go back, they get arrested. How long do they stay in prison? No one knows. On average, 21 months. So about 2 years. Is it happening in Syria? To be perfectly honest, I don't know. I'm telling you what's happening in Kosovo and Metohija. And if I hear the Albanian ambassador, then it turns out that 11-year-old Stefan Stojanovic shot himself. And that Azem Kurtaj probably helped him. Took him to hospital. No, in fact, Azem Kurtaj, who's a free man, shot 11-year-old boy on the eve of the Christmas, of the Christmas day. Serbian Orthodox Christmas. That is how Serbs live in Kosovo and Metohija. Then we heard that Serbia wants Kosovo territory, and Serbia thinks that we are the only ones who can interpret the international law. Well, let me tell you something. We are sitting here in the UN Security Council, United Nations, recognizes the Republic of Serbia in its entirety, Republic of Serbia and autonomous province of Kosovo and Metohija as part of the Republic of Serbia. This is where we sit. This is the home of the United Nations. You're not a member of the UN. So 80% of the world population does not recognize Kosovo and Metohija. And finally, and I'm finishing with this, we heard again victims of sexual violence. As a woman, I can say that I think that sexual violence, rape, is the worst crime in the humanity. You know what? Albanian women were raped, unfortunately, and regrettably. Serbian women were raped as well. Roma women were raped as well. And to be honest, I cannot believe that even victims of sexual violence are seen only through the eyes of ethnicity and used only for political propaganda. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of Serbia for her statement. Ms. Osmani Sadriou has asked for the floor. I'll give her the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to start by thanking all those countries who have been contributing not only through their speeches, but also through their work with us in the ground for peace and stability in the entire Western Balkans. And for those of you that have concerns, I want to say we want to work with you to make things better, because we in Kosovo believe that democracy is never a finished project. It was actually sufficient to listen to the speech of the Russian Federation to understand which party here is telling the truth and which one is spurring falsities through a propaganda machine. Russia once again used propaganda against the people of Kosovo and against those who fought for the freedom of Kosovo, the Kosovo Liberation Army. The biggest difference between Kosovo and Serbia is that we are not afraid of justice, which is why we have ourselves created the specialist chambers, because we will not allow for a moral equivalence to be created between those who committed genocide and those that defended our people from genocide. As was the case in the past, we are fully confident that justice will once again prevail. Mr. President, members of the Council, my people were victims of some of the most horrendous crimes known in humankind history. It is precisely because of the pain and the suffering we had to go through that make us so committed to never ever see that ever happening to anyone else again, no matter their ethnicity or religion or other background. It is being victims of a genocidal war that has shaped us into the strongest defenders of peace, stability, human rights, rule of law, and freedom, but also defenders of truth from propaganda. You heard Russia and Ms. Brnabic today speaking about the so-called Kurti terror. Kurti is the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kosovo, but he was also a war prisoner, almost tortured to death in their prisons, while the President of Serbia during those same years was the Minister of Propaganda for Milosevic. And as if that was not enough, they publicly state, even nowadays, including last night by the President of Serbia, that they wish that they had never released Kurti from prisons alive. Yet again, the Prime Minister of Kosovo has chosen the dialogue. In that table led by EU negotiators, on one side you have the Prime Minister of Kosovo, a war prisoner, almost tortured to death. And on the other side, you have the Minister of Propaganda of the regime that tortured him. But we will never give up on dialogue as the only means for resolving any difference between us, because Kosovo is a country full of Mandelas, Gandhis, and Martin Luther Kings, of people who strive for the future, for peace and reconciliation. Our parliament, our government, every institution, every house in our republic is full of survivors of horrendous crimes, but all of them committed to and working for peace. This is who we are, a nation of survivors who thrive, a nation committed to peace because we have seen the opposite of it, a nation committed to democracy because we've lived the opposite of it, and a nation that is ready to pay any price to ensure the survival and the success of liberty. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Ms. Osmani Sadriou for her statement. The President thinks that speakers have made their points. The meeting is adjourned.
into a new country.